Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Eric. Today I'm going to talk about Predator 2, the sequel to the 1987 film. The Predator 2 was directed by Stephen Hopkins, who had done, I think, the fifth Elm Street film the year before, so he was brought on to direct. Danny Glover came on to star in the film as Lieutenant Mike Harrigan. There's a really good cast in this film, really interesting cast, but just to talk about the story a little bit. So it's set in the near future, Los Angeles. The year is 1997, and gang warfare is overwhelming the city. And we start out with the 15-minute sequence of basically a battle between the gangs and the police, which Danny Glover is like the head of the gang unit. And so a really violent shootout begins the film. And then there's the opening shot of the film where the camera is panning over what looks like a jungle, but then we see the LA skyline, right? So it was a clever opening shot that set the tone for the film. As the story goes on, we're following the Predator around the city who is wreaking havoc, who is also getting involved in the gang warfare that's going on. So you have Gary Busey play a character, a Fed, who is knows about the Predator and wants to capture it and learn about its weaponry. So that's one aspect of it. Danny Glover's partner is killed earlier in the film, which that happens so much in these movies where the partner or the protagonist is killed. And Bill Paxton is brought in as a new partner, playing kind of a Paxton's really kind of playing a goofball here. Yeah, so the rest of the cast, Ruben Blades is in here, Maria Alonso, Morton Downey Jr., who not a well-known figure today, but he was really popular in the late 1980s as a talk show host, where he would have controversial topics on his show, and they would always get into shouting matches, sometimes get into fights, and Downey was kind of a reactionary on the issues, and that's kind of what he plays in this film. He plays a TV reporter who is, doing these really extravagant reports on how violent the city is and how angry he is about the state of things. So, kind of some interesting casting there with Morton Downey Jr. Kind of a fictional version of himself. So yeah, that's the story of the film, really. You have this intrigue with the gangs and the police, and the Predator in the middle of all this, and you have some really good action sequences. There's one I like in particular that's on the subway, where you have the Predator on the subway, and just a really kind of suspenseful, well done scene. Bill Paxton, I think, well, spoiler, he does get killed in this film. So he's been killed by an alien, by a xenomorph in Aliens, and now a Predator has got him. Of course, those two franchises would merge, which we get in the final. At the end of this movie, there's a little tease for that. But anyway, I like the visual style of the film. It's really glossy. The editing is really it's really fast paced. It's just kind of it's a very violent, bruising film in a number of ways. But I like the color scheme, where just that glossy look. A lot of smoky blues and metallic colors and a lot of neon, kind of that neo noir look. So there's just a lot of style in this film, which I think would be influential through the rest of the 90s. You think like Tony Scott and Rennie Harlan, their style is very much in line with this film that Hopkins brought to it. So I do like that. Danny Glover is really good. He's an interesting choice. He's, of course, known for playing a Murtaugh in the Lethal Weapon movies, but here he's playing a much different character. He's much more the action hero. He's really steely. He's really resourceful. Of course, the joke in the Lethal Weapons film is that he's over the hill and near retirement, but here he's playing a cop who's really in his prime and really really rising to the occasion of the action scenes. So that worked out well. Yeah, I think the film, one of the aspects of the film, though, the depiction of gang culture in this film was really negative. We have like the Jamaican gang, which is apparently the main one in Los Angeles, and there's Colombian gangs mentioned, and that they also practice voodoo, and we get these really over the top scenes of voodoo rituals, which Hollywood has a long history of really not representing voodoo well, or even Caribbean cultures well in its film. So we get some really over the top xenophobia in this film as well. I mean, you could say it's being a satire of that or whatever, but it's there, which kind of goes with these narratives of the 1990s of cities being these battlegrounds, and there'd be so much focus on Los Angeles in the 90s. A lot of fiction films will be set there, like Strange Days would be one, but Falling Down with Michael Douglas, not a science fiction film, but still of that vein of L.A. as like a real barometer of American culture. Where a few years before the L.A. riots in 1992, which the fallout from the Rodney King verdict. So that tension is really, you can feel it in this film. And of course, the O.J. Simpson trial would happen in the mid 90s. Once again, all the focus there on Los Angeles and law enforcement and issues of gender, issues of race. So that would be such a big part of the 1990s. I think at one point a character says, "Welcome to the war," and even the term "carnage" is thrown around quite a bit. Of once again that idea like outsiders of cities would have as like these places of that are very violent and filled with violent people and really frightening places. So, yeah. One thing I thought this film, we see a lot of the Predator in this film where we spend a lot of time. And one of the strengths I think in the first film is that we don't spend a lot of time with the Predator. It's like the Jaws thing where we don't reveal too much. But here we're with him a lot. At one point, the Predator has been wounded, and he gets into this apartment, older lady's apartment, and sneaks into her bathroom, and he's cleaning his wounds. So you really feel like, wow, we're really demystifying things with this scene. So that felt a little bit ridiculous. The film does, at the end, it does boost the mythology a little bit, though, where we learn a little bit more about the origins of the Predator and their culture. So that's where we get that tease for the crossover with the Alien franchise. So that was interesting at the end. But yeah, overall, I like the visual style of this film. It just has that really flashy look. The editing is fast paced, and there's, like I said, I like the action scene in the subway. So but it's a real fever dream of a movie. It's really messy in some areas. It's There's a lot of paranoia, a lot of violence, and very much an indicator of its time, I think, to give you a sense of the anxieties of the culture of going into the 1990s. And Predator 2 does a good job of that, as a product of Hollywood at the time. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Predator 2. Let me know what you think of the film. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.